So this is my first progress report or check-in on my quick study project. And overall, I've spent a few days now learning the notes for the piece, and I'm actually quite pleased that I've made some progress and I feel like I'm getting it. There's still some obvious areas where I don't know the notes as well as I'd like, but we're now 5 days in, and I can play the piece from start to finish, but there are a few areas that are very obviously needing a bit more work, particularly towards the end in bars 59, 60, 59 and 60, where those grace notes come in. So that's that's sort of where it's at the moment. But I think broadly on track, although we'll see what happens over the next few days. In terms of what I've learned or the outcomes, and perhaps I'll share what went wrong or didn't work so well. So I'd said earlier, from the outset, that I thought this process would hold a light to some of the bad habits and practices that could be improved upon in terms of trying to learn more efficiently and effectively. And that's certainly what happened here. Even with this greater emphasis on being productive and disciplined, because of the time constraints and the parameters of this project, I still found that I wasted quite a lot of time on relearning incorrect fingerings and even incorrect notes. So I should have embedded my fingerings sooner and just been more structured with them. And I've noticed that areas where it falls apart are often where I'm unsure of a fingering because I seem to chop and change between a few almost subconsciously without really thinking about it. I did also make the mistake of doing things like where for example, in bar 15, there's this lovely bit, and I just play on lazily. And there, bar 18, I learned the wrong note. I learned a G sharp instead of an F sharp. And it took me ages of practicing this to try and unlearn that. So a complete waste of time and so unnecessary. I also managed to learn, I did my read through and was quite sloppy. I suppose, obviously it's not going to be perfect on a read through, but I wasn't quick to correct a lot of the mistakes. And I was still tempted to maybe read through or sight read and play some of the nice bits more than I should. So I managed to learn an incorrect rhythm here where I had this. I had to repeat a note because I played a triplet instead of a duplet, so it should be. So definitely could be a lot more disciplined with that kind of thing in future. Another thing that I would do differently, or what I've learned from the last week, is that although the emphasis was on learning the notes, I probably should have been a bit more careful still to try and make playing slowly and even just the drills and repetitions a bit more musical. Because now that I'm going to be moving into hopefully polishing it a bit more with the hope of recording it, I've just found that there's a few areas where I've been quite lazy and where I should perhaps have given just some of the musical meaning and phrasing and pedaling and things like that a little bit more thought. But let me then look at perhaps some of the positive takeouts from this. So one of the things that I found that worked really, really well was the chaining. And I did that. I was fairly disciplined with that for some of the more difficult sections. So for example, bar 53 with this that bit there, I was quite disciplined where I did this. And built it up slowly that way. And I'm still going to continue practicing like that because as you can see from that, I don't quite know it brilliantly yet. It's a bit hit and miss still. But what was very interesting with some of these more difficult bits is, as is always the case, you set out on a project like this with best of intentions. You're going to practice every day and all of that. I thought I'd try and practice at least 20 minutes a day. But life happened and I wasn't able to do that every day. There were 1 or 2 days where I had less time than that, and there was one day where I couldn't practice at all. So, but what really, really helped was having those, as I identified, those difficult spots or quarantine or cue spots and a way of practicing and drilling them that that only took a few minutes. So on the one day where I literally had 5 minutes, I just did those that way. And was really surprised in 2 or 3 days that I'd made quite a lot of progress in learning them. I almost knew them. And so it was really quite encouraging that it was possible, even in a very time-constrained day, to still be able to do something constructive and make some progress with the piece. So what am I going to do next? Well, as I mentioned, there's some obvious spots that I need to do a bit more drilling and working and practice on. So I will keep on working on those and just make sure I know the notes better. I need to do a bit more work on the runs towards the end of the piece. So those I'm going to break down, I'm going to chain them, I'm going to make sure that I can kind of allocate them properly as groups to the left hand. Otherwise, if I'm thinking about each of the notes, it's just not going to be fast enough. So that's going to be a specific area of focus. And even if I've got only a bit of time to play on any given day, I'm going to hone in on those areas. I'm also going to use some slow practice, but with real focus on the quality of the sound I'm producing, the phrasing, all of the sort of musical aspects, to try and just polish it a bit so that when I record it, I play something that's not just the notes. So that's the next step. I said I wanted to do a recording after a week. I've been learning the piece for 5 days, so in the next day or two, I'm going to try and give it a stab at recording, but just for myself. I'm not sure that, well, I'll share it maybe if it's not too horrendous, but it's more just having that goal to work towards, and also as a stepping stone before playing it in the lesson, which is in a few days' time.